Привет, I'm Chuck Olenek. I'm a Ukrainian-American baptized with the name Yaroslav. That's also the name that I use in the historical reenactment group, the Society for Creative Anachronism, where I'm known as Kyr Yaroslav the Persistent. So on the previous video that I did in this series, Tales of the Borderland, where I explore Slavic, folklore, and mythology, and Ukrainian and Russian and Eastern European history and culture, I took a look at the idea of writing with birch bark or on birch bark. And I went into sources and, medieval Novgorod or Novgorod, depending on how you pronounce it, and where these birch bark documents were dug up. They were called beresti. And I explained what my research showed on how to write on this stuff. And that was kind of a rabbit hole I stumbled into. And then I decided to go further when I heard about a boy named Onfim and writings he left behind. So we're going to take a look at that. Beginning in the 9th century, the city of Novgorod, surrounded by birch forests, became a bustling medieval trade hub with connections to the Hanseatic League. It was called Veliki Novgorod, or Novgorod the Great, and it was the capital of the Republic of Novgorod. Those birch forests supplied building materials for houses, logs for the city's streets. The birch bark could be woven into shoes called lapti. Check out the giant's lapti. I remember the word lapti from when my mom would make slippers for us to wear in the house. Only in recent years did I learn the term was actually connected to these birch bark shoes. And yeah, I thought about getting a pair when I found out I could buy them. Except that, all right, I thought maybe for those quick runs to the privy at night at a war, when you're in a hurry. But then I started thinking about how they'd handle wet grass and mud, but that's another topic. And they also looked frightfully uncomfortable. So the clay that was around Novgorod, especially when it got waterlogged, was an archaeologist's dream. Basically, because of the composition of the soil and the fact that the soil was waterlogged, it preserved over 1,200 letters and documents that were written on birch bark. Those are called beresta, birch bark. All right. And it turned out that the inner surface and sometimes the rough outer surface of the bark could be readily available to write all sorts of records and documents. Since Novgorod was a center of commerce and trade connected to the affluent Hanseatic League, record keeping is pretty obviously important. Scholars believe that the Novgorod Republic had an unusually high level of literacy for the time, with literacy apparently widespread throughout different classes and amongst both sexes. So there's a lot of the beresti around, and that kind of shows that there's a high rate of literacy amongst the population of Veliki Novgorod. And a lot of the beresti were written in the vernacular, so that's another indicator that literacy was widespread. Okay, this brings us to Anthemius. He's better known by the modern Russian spelling of his name, Onfim. Onfim was a boy who lived in Veliki Novgorod sometime around 1220, maybe 1260, and he ended up leaving his notes and homework exercises or school exercises scratched in birch bark, and that got preserved in the clay soil of his city. Here's a statue dedicated to him. Onfim who was most likely about 6 or 7 around the time he was writing, wrote in the East Slavic Old Novgorod dialect. And besides letters and syllables, he drew battle scenes and drawings of himself and his teacher. Oh, I can so relate to this. I taught 10th grade world history forever, and when I'd look at my students' notebooks, because I do weekly notebook checks, I'd sometimes find comments written in the margins and the occasional drawing of me, some of which might have been left there intentionally, others just because a kid was bored. So I'm looking at that experience and looking at what Onfim left behind, and I'm kind of seeing it through those eyes. So let's take a look at that. Onfim left 17 known beresti. 12 of those have illustrations. 5 are text only. One of the drawings features a knight, or maybe a bogatyr, or maybe a družinik, a warrior who would share the prince's fire, on a horse, with Onfim's name written next to him, stabbing someone on the ground with a lance, with scholars speculating that Onfim pictured himself as the knight or warrior. Here's a better look at it. Kir Onfim. Same illustration with some scale. The writings, they're pretty clearly learning exercises. Onfim is practicing by writing the alphabet and repeating syllables, and he's writing a number of religious texts. These are texts that he's probably pretty familiar with. Let's take a look at that. Here's one. Now, when the 6th hour, that's in quotation marks, there is a series of syllables and portraits. On another piece of bark, Onfim drew a stick figure boy fighting a bizarre multi-headed creature, kind of like a hydra. And the words he wrote, "Lord, help your servant Onfim." Maybe he's asking for divine intervention in his battle with this monster. I can hear folks in church saying, "Господи помилуй, Lord have mercy." So there's what he was supposed to do, practicing writing. Then there's the times he quit partway through writing and he opted to draw instead. Then there's where he just threw in the towel and gave up completely. Greetings from Onfim to Danilo is written in a box on one of his drawings, clearly intended for his friend. I like how the hands have anywhere from 3 to 8 fingers. But hey, he's 6 or 7. I really like this one. This was originally the bottom of a basket made of birch bark, according to one source. I can see that, being as people usually didn't keep a lot of things written on birch bark, so why not recycle it? Of course, to me, that begs the question of how did the basket get preserved? And are the marks around the edges holes for sewing the pieces of birch bark together? There's another source that suggests that the holes were for Onfim to have actually worn this while playing, but I'm kind of questioning that. Okay, there's homework, or is that classwork, or kids doing homework? And the picture of some creature, and there's text going with it. "I am a wild beast." This comes across so very Calvin and Hobbes. And the drawing of the bogatyr slaying someone on the ground, this is reminding me so much of Spaceman Spiff. So there, a bit further down the rabbit hole of playing with birch bark. Okay, I had to go further. I ordered some birch bark from Amazon, and I'm going to be experimenting writing on it. So, got experimental archaeology going on. Until next time, до побачення.